How long does a drawing take to do? If you're thinking, well, I don't know till I've done it. If you have no firm idea or even approximate idea how long a drawing is going to take when you start it, then it probably means that your method of drawing is to choose a subject, to start and to keep drawing till you think you've finished it. Is this you? And when we're really at the more beginner stage of our learning to draw, this is a very common and very easy to understand method. And in lots of ways, it can be helpful. But as we move on in our drawing development, if we want to move from a beginner's level to a more advanced level, then taking as long as a drawing takes to do, I think robs us of the conditions where we will learn many extremely valuable lessons about the drawing process and how we draw in particular. At the very basis of the drawing will take as long as it takes seems to presuppose that there's just one way to do it and I just have to do it and stick at it till it's done. But if we don't move on from this, after a while what happens is that our subject, which for me in this case I was actually sitting in front of in an upper gallery of St Andrew's Cathedral in Sydney, but what it means is our subject actually starts to control our drawing. The subject determines how long I take. And while we may not appreciate it at the beginner stage so much, how long I take determines the techniques that I use in my mark making, in my composition, in all the choices that I make when I draw. Time pressure can be a great friend in evolving our drawing techniques and skills, which we can then use to create more sophisticated effects and overall drawings. I want to use this scene to do two relatively quick sketches. Let's start. Now, this first drawing I decided would take me about 15 minutes to draw. That was approximate. I was happy to go a couple of minutes either way. But the thing that happens from the very start, where I've said to myself, I'm going to draw this in this time frame, is that I have to change, I have to adapt the way I'm drawing and what I'm drawing to fit in with that time frame as being realistic. I have to have time to do the thinking I need to do, to make the marks I need to make, and to create the effect that I want to create. And once I say to myself, I'm going to have about 15 minutes to do that, now I have a pressure that I don't have on me. If I think, oh, this is a great, interesting scene to draw, I'm going to draw it. We learn a lot of things that way. But what we don't learn to do is to increase the range of ways of thinking we have, to increase the marks that we make, to increase the various ways we can put them on the paper, to increase the various effects we can create. Because when we have to do things in a much shorter time, and you're watching this at just a little bit more than double the speed I drew it in. So if you want to use the cog icon to slow this down to half the video speed, you'll be seeing it only very slightly faster than the speed I drew it in. And I obviously didn't learn to draw fast as my first drawing lesson. What happens is, though, over time, when we put ourselves in a time pressure, it affects the marks we make and the way we make them and the effects we create. And as is the case with anything that we work hard at and we work sensibly at, over time we will improve. We'll start to see things that we couldn't see before. We'll start to be able to do things that we couldn't do before. So although this is just over 6 minutes, it took me about 15 and a half minutes to do. Now, one of the big difficulties is just working out what details to draw. And because I want to finish this in 15 minutes, I don't want to have it look half finished. So I've decided that I will just stick to the lower level of this government building that's in Hobart, Tasmania. But I love the way it caught the light. And so even though this is a quick sketch, it's still important to have goals for what we want to show at the end of it, because we want our marks to create the overall effect. And the stark sunlight, shadow, play, contrast, for me, is important. And also the contrast between this Doric portico at the side of the building and these daylilies that are flowering in such abundance in the lower section. So I'm also wanting to create effects in my 15 minutes that show the contrast not just of the light and dark in the building, but of the architecture and the more natural garden features. Now, that is a challenge because there is a lot of detail to do here. And I suppose I'm thinking I could easily spend 40% of the time of the drawing doing this. And sometimes that's the way it works. Now, I am trying to draw the effect, not the detail, and giving ourselves a time limit is a great way to improve that particular drawing skill, which is one of the ones I personally find most helpful of all. Not trying to draw the detail, which is easy to fall into when we think we have as much time as it takes. And very often when we start to draw all that detail, at some point we get bogged down, we lose enthusiasm, we lose interest, and then we find something more interesting to draw and we move on, in fact. Whereas having a set time, I now control what sort of marks I use in order to fit into the time frame as well as my overall purposes. I hope you can see it's a much more sophisticated way of thinking, and it demands a lot more of us. And any new thing we do that demands a lot more of us, we won't succeed at the start as much as we will after some more experience and perhaps direction. But the thing we need to realize is that drawing in a faster, more gestural way is not the same as being careless. It's not gestural versus precise. We need to be precise in our gestural drawing, as well as needing to be precise in our more detailed, longer taking drawing. But while this is a relatively simple subject, there were a lot of complex decisions to make because of the time. And how I rendered certain areas, such as this wrought iron, also came down to speed and only having time to create the effect of this lower railing rather than the exactness of it. And these are all really important skills to develop that we don't develop if we plod along just basically copying everything we see in the photo as best we can. What I'm doing is I'm upping by quite a large degree the amount of creative thinking I need to do to work out what lines to make, where to make them, what marks to make, where to put them, what to leave out, what to include, what to emphasize, all in the time that I've got. In fact, this, albeit artificial time pressure, can be just the thing to helping us push through perfectionism, of pushing through being paralyzed at fear of mistakes, because it simply doesn't give us time for that fear, and that hopefully releases us to learn to make the marks that we need to make to do the drawings that we want to draw. So here I am drawing the much more time-pressured version, which I gave myself, well, I was hoping to do it in 7 minutes. I actually took just over 8 minutes to do it. But it pretty much is half the time that the first drawing you saw took. Although, in fact, I drew this one first because I thought it might help me not to get bogged down in detail, and also just to give me a chance to have a more careful observation as an investment in the second drawing. But can I say, this one, not for that reason, was by far the more difficult to do, because I knew that I was going to have a lot less time to draw a lot less. I knew that I was going to have to make a lot of decisions about what I included and how I included it, because I wasn't going to have time to be as precise as I might normally like to be. But I certainly wasn't going to have the time to do all the detail I would normally like to do. So I started by outlining the portico, because this really has to be as accurately looking from a perspective and proportions point of view as I can possibly manage.
because it really is the focal point. But very quick, very gestural, pretty much obliterating some of the things I've drawn already with my very black hatching for the shadows. But if we want something to look like it's in bright sunlight, we need to have strong contrast in shadows. So now I start doing these lilies in the front. So this is the first time I've actually drawn them, and I am being very gestural. I'm really just trying to draw the effect, but I'm not going to have the time to draw the effect over the whole area that they're in. So therefore I need to do it sparingly, and it's even more a case of creating the effect. So I need to have a few spots where it's very clear what's happening, and then a few spots where it's suggested, and I can probably get away with some more gaps. And we'll compare the two drawings in a moment, and you can see the different choices that I made as part of the time pressure. So I put this window in, and again, a pretty gestural approach, which is actually a way of drawing I really enjoy. And haven't quite worked out what else I'm doing. I decided to put the flutes on these columns because they are an important part visually of Doric columns, and then some of these parts that we see through the two central columns. And I'm pretty much out of my time. And what happens is I've been forced to draw in a very different way with very different thinking to create a, if you like, finished drawing in the time I had available. It's pushed my skill, knowledge, understanding, and ability in a way that wouldn't have happened if I was just drawing until it was done. Let's compare the two of them now.
Quite apart from which drawing do you prefer, the one done in the shorter time frame or the one that took twice as long, I hope you can see something of the difference that the time pressure created for each of them. They both have a significantly gestural feel, I believe. And if I'd sat down to draw this taking, say, an hour, then it would have had a lot more of a finished, polished look. There wouldn't have been the roughness that we can so easily find in parts of the line works and marks that we have here. And yet this very roughness actually becomes part of the characteristic of the drawing style for this drawing because it's consistent over the whole drawing. It doesn't look as if I did down here carefully and I'd lost interest and just wanted to finish it quickly up here, or more likely vice versa. Because that time frame gave me a different way of thinking, at least in degrees, for each of the drawings, I had to push my creative thinking further, and then how I would interpret what I was thinking into marks on the paper. And I think this pushes us into the development of our creative thought processes, as well as in our mark-making options and control under different circumstances for different outcomes. That's an important part of how we move from beginner drawers to more advanced drawers. To draw differently, we need to think differently. And time pressure at the right time, in the right way, at the right pressure, is a great way for us to develop the more complex creative thinking we need to do, and the more varied marks that we can place to create a wider range of effects. Then we will more confidently move away from a beginner's way of drawing to a drawing style that has more consistency and clearly operates from a more advanced level. G'day, I'm Stephen Travers. I hope you found this interesting. I would probably have spent 40 minutes to draw this if I wasn't putting a time pressure on me. And however my drawing would have looked, it certainly wouldn't have had the liveliness, the vitality, I think, that these two more brisk sketches have. So look, I hope you found this interesting, and I hope it encourages some of you, if you think it's the right time, to shake up your creative processes, your creative thinking, and to push yourself into new areas that can often give you quite unexpected improvement in your drawing thinking, your drawing processes, and in your drawings. But look, whatever you draw, however you draw it, make sure you have fun. I'll see you next time. Bye.